Hey, this is James Riley.
And Beth Riley.
And we've got another cool edition of our Artist Spotlight podcast series. Beth, who do we have?
Straight out of Canada, we have Darren Michael Boyd.
How you doing?
Hey, how are you guys?
Sounded like a rap album, straight out of Canada.
The mean streets of Canada.
That's right. Well, man, we'll talk about your latest instrumental record, Last Seen in Canada, in just a bit. But first, wanted to talk about music and some other things. How have you been spending time during this pandemic?
Yeah, I've been obviously not gigging very much. I've had like the odd show, but not much. So, writing and just trying to get better. And that's the main thing, working away.
How did you get your start in music, and who are some of your influences?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, when I was about 7 years old, I got my first record, which was Alice Cooper's Love It to Death. And my first Kiss record. They were like superheroes to me, and that kind of set me on a path. I wanted to write songs, and that's really all it was. I wanted to be as weird as they were. So mission accomplished.
I read somewhere that you're a big fan of Meatloaf, so I kind of wanted to bring that up because unfortunately he was one of the ones that passed away this year.
Yeah. I've been asked a lot about just like interviews all the time. People ask the question, like if you could perform with or sit down and have lunch with like an artist, living or dead, who would it be? And I always would say Jim Steinman or Meatloaf or Prince. And what's very sad is that list is starting to grow onto the side of no longer alive. And I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, it's pretty sad, but yeah, Meatloaf, what a contribution to pop culture and music in general. It's sad to lose him for sure.
Your debut album, Lifting the Curse, it was released in 2019, right?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. It had quite possibly your most successful song on it, The Earth is B Flat. Tell us about how that song came about.
Honestly, if you watch the video, and I think more people have watched that video than any others that I've done for whatever reason, I don't know why, but it's like very evident I was watching too many reruns of the X-Files. And so it just has this spacey sound to it. The Earth is B flat. I just thought was hysterical. I don't know. It's a lot of my titles are like that. I just kind of find something that I think is kind of funny and has multiple meanings. Actually, somebody asked me once if I thought that the Earth was flat because they kind of missed the B flat joke. And I was like, no, it's a musician thing, I guess.
As I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about your latest project, Last Seen in Canada, which we actually just listened to again this morning. A great album. We both played songs on our radio shows.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sure. And you can definitely tell a variety of influences. What can fans expect to hear from this project?
I keep thinking about that. It's very odd. I don't know how else to say it. It goes into some weird directions, and I allow myself to do that. A lot of times we're always told like to focus on these micro niches and subgenres and stuff. And I'm like, my thing is to just get out of the way of the song and let it go where it wants to go. And one of the things I will say is that it's still accessible. Like there's a lot of melody, and the songs I don't think anything goes over 4 minutes. I think they're all very, to the point songs. I don't know. It's hard to classify it. I've kind of been calling some of it spooky surf, but it delves a little into metal, a little into hard rock. I don't know. Like maybe you guys would have a better idea of what it is than I do.
Well, you're right. It definitely crosses a lot of genres. And the cool thing is something we've talked a lot about is I feel like we're due for some instrumental songs to kind of crack the charts again. It kind of become popular like they were in the 50s and 60s. They kind of went away for a little bit, at least from the public eye. They were still being made. And then Pulp Fiction kind of brought back some Dick Dale and Link Ray and some other stuff too.
Right.
So I feel like it'd be cool to see some of this pop up. That's maybe hard to classify as far as a style.
Yeah, that's the problem now as far as charts go is, I'm sure you guys know, it's not easy to have a song just put on the radio. Because what was it, 1960 or something that the Shadows had Apache? Is that correct?
Sure,
That was like a number one for like 5 weeks or something. Now, I know we're a long way from the 60s, but it is possible. I don't know that is possible with what I'm doing. But there's a band called Polyphia. I hope I'm getting that correct. And, younger guys playing pretty progressive instrumental music. And I was blown away when I heard them. I'm like, what is going on? But it's when I say progressive, like these musicians, that's kind of the audience, I think, is a lot of people who are really into that extraordinary playing. And I think what makes my sound different is that it's still about just these songs that you don't have to be a guitar nerd to love or a fan of progressive music. Again, the songs are short and it's about melody. It's not about trying to blow anybody's mind with flashy guitar playing or anything like that.
Do you have a favorite track from the album?
Wow. That changes probably by the hour. I kind of like the title track, Last Seen in Canada, because it just reminds me of an old Kiss song or something. I don't know why, but it just has something in these sort of counter riffs going on. I'll stick with that for the moment.
You mentioned Kiss. Do you have a favorite song of theirs? And remember who you're talking to.
Well, I know you want me to say Beth, right? But
no, I don't really. It was me joking.
Yeah, that's a tough one because, I mean, they have an enormous catalog, right? So that's almost impossible. I could narrow down, like, I think Kiss Destroyer and Alive, of course, both of the first two Alive albums are, hugely influential on pretty much everybody who plays music. And Revenge is one of my favorite albums, and that's like a non-makeup record. It's just perfect. Bob Ezrin back in the fold for that, and Destroyer, right? So he's kind of a producer hero of mine and a lot of people, I think, and Canadian too.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Have you thought of doing vocal projects too, or can you say more with instrumentals? Can you go more places without singing? I know it's an odd question to say. I'm not sure I'm even asking it correctly, but
No, I know what you mean. And I've been a songwriter my whole life. And when I say that, I include lyrics. This project came about because I had a car accident and I just needed to do something creative that was different. And then as I was doing it, it turned into a legitimate project somewhere along the way. I never set out to be a solo artist or make instrumental albums. To be honest, it was more the reason I didn't. I think I probably felt inferior. I probably felt like, who's going to listen to this? I'm not very good. And people are going to compare me to the greats, and that's going to be difficult to deal with. I was surprised how well received the stuff has been. So it's kind of been a bit of a confidence boost. And the fact that people get it. I was expecting a lot of people to go, well, this doesn't sound like Steve Vai or whatever. And then, of course, no, it doesn't. It's not supposed to, right? But nobody says that. And that's pretty cool. But yeah, to answer your question, as far as vocals, I'm still working with my singer V from Creeping Beauty. We haven't really done very much because of the pandemic. And I have a band that I play with in Toronto called Famous Underground. And the singer and leader of that band is Nick Walsh, who's a Juno Award-winning singer. He's amazing. As for me singing, I wish that I would get to that point. And that's the advice I give guitar players. When people say, what should I do? Any advice for guitar players? I always say, yeah, learn to sing. And not because you need to be a lead vocalist, but if you're an okay guitar player and can sing harmonies, you're going to get the gig. If you're a wicked guitar player and can't sing harmonies, the other guy's getting the gig. So always put some effort into that. I wish I had. But it's not too late. I can still work on it.
Now, this is going to seem a bit like you're in a therapy session, but I promise you're not.
Yeah.
What has been the most difficult thing that you've had to endure in either your career or just life in general?
The reason why it sounds like a therapy question to me is because I've spent a lot of time in therapy because when I had that car accident, I've been diagnosed with a lot of things. And I usually don't even talk about this stuff because it doesn't really matter, I guess. But at the same time, I wasn't even comfortable with the original press release that went out that talks about the car accident because I thought, do I really want to talk about that? But then I realized we can all relate because everybody has profoundly painful times and, wonderful times. Life is a roller coaster for everybody. Nobody gets out of this without loss. And so I think so far that was one of the most difficult things that I faced, not because of the accident itself, but just the whole ongoing process after it. I was not responsible for the accident, just to put that into perspective. Somebody else ran a red light and into me, and it really uprooted my life for almost 3 years where I just sat there going, what am I going to do? So what I did was create more music. So that was a real challenge and a real eye-opener as to how that system works. And a lot of people have no idea what you go through, even if you're just in a minor accident, even though it wasn't your fault. It's quite an experience.
I get nervous every time we're around an 18-wheeler after getting hit by one before. It's like that kind of fear just never goes away. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that was one of the things talking about therapy where I would have a lot of dreams. Even to this day, I don't have a lot of nightmares or anything, but I do have interrupted sleep a lot. That can be really difficult when you don't sleep properly. And I never realized or appreciated how important that is. And then of course things like sleeping pills. When you're somebody who is productive and doesn't like to be a zombie, I'm sure there are probably the right kind, but I haven't found them, so I just avoid that altogether.
Man, we can completely relate on that as well. Something we talk about a lot, just wishing we could find a time machine to go back to a different time period. I think both of us here maybe were born in a different time that maybe we wish we'd born somewhere else. I don't know. But do you ever think about that? If you could go back to a certain time period or a certain year or event, is there something you would go to?
That's a good question. For me, and probably the same with you, it's a lot of pop culture stuff, right? You kind of think of certain periods of time like the 60s. Have you seen Last Night in Soho?
No.
Yeah, you got to check that out. I'm amazed how many people haven't heard of that. It's just coming out on DVD right now, I believe, or streaming. But I saw it in the theater, and I won't give it away, but it does have a lot of 60s stuff in it that is really quite cool. Other than that, I'm not really sure. But I do feel what you're saying, though. It seems like there's a lot that maybe we missed out on. I don't know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Music and cars and clothes. But then again, if we were in that time, we may wish, man, I wish we could go to like year 2022 or something.
Yeah, the 80s or something. And,
yeah.
And I noticed that you had a guest on, Joel.
So.
Yeah, I read his book. I don't know if I mentioned I'm a mild-mannered librarian by day, so I read a lot of rock books, biographies, and stuff like that. And Hollywood Eden was a blast. That was quite an eye-opener, too.
An amazing time period, and especially all those people going to school together. And I don't know we'll ever see something like that happen again.
Isn't that the whole thing, though, when you're kind of immersed in that world? And that's exactly it. It's like this magic of a time period that once it's gone, that's it. It's not going to happen again. And it's kind of like, I read Noel Monk's book about Van Halen, Running with the Devil. He was managing them in the early days. And right now I'm reading one from Vicki Hamilton called Appetite for Dysfunction. And she was consulting manager for like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and all these Sunset Strip bands in the 80s. And the same thing, that whole scene, it's just not going to be repeated. Not like that, you know.
I wish I could read like that. I'm still reading a book I started about 25 years ago. I'm just kidding.
I don't read as fast as some people seem to think I do. I have a problem with, I'm not alone in this, all of the librarians, we all have the same problem where we get so many materials coming through across the desk and we're like, I got to have that. So yoink, I'm taking that home, and then you get a stack of them and you want to get to them eventually. But certain things like that, I just finished Dennis Dunaway's book. He was from the original Alice Cooper group, the original bass player. And that was one of those books that I was sad when it ended. I wanted to just keep going. It was so good.
You mentioned Alice Cooper a couple of times. Do you do your style based on him?
Not intentionally. That's something, even when I was a teenager, I somehow was, I don't know if it's smart enough or what the word is exactly, but I had the awareness, I guess, that even though I loved Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen and Angus Young and all those people, and, Alice Cooper, I knew that if I tried to be like them, I would write songs just like them. So it's important to take influences and inspiration from everywhere, but I didn't want to be like somebody else. And when you think about it, like, add Brian May and all these iconic guitar players, and every single one of them sounds totally different from the other, and
that's true.
Like, they're all using the same tuning. They're all using the same number of notes. We all have 12 notes. It's like a voice. It's such an amazing instrument because you can truly make it your own.
Here's a tough one for you. Nothing like making you nervous before it happens there.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Call a therapist. No. If you had 3 to 5 albums that you would take with you on a desert island, and I know this could change every day, but just today, if you could narrow that down, is there 3 to 5 that you think, if I have to only narrow this down, what can I take?
Right, if I have to, that's it. I think if I had to, for the sake of diversity, I suppose, like Alice Cooper's Love It to Death, I could pretty much pick any Alice Cooper album and it would probably work. Probably Bat Out of Hell, because, there's so much going on that one album. And probably Witches from One Eyed Doll. I never get tired of that. That's an underrated masterpiece, I think. So that's not even today. That's just this moment.
Is there an artist that you haven't had a chance to work with yet that you'd like to, or one that you missed out on working with because they're no longer here? year.
Wow. Well, I'd still go back to Alice Cooper just because I just know so much. I feel like I get the music. Prince would be one, even though I don't know that working with Prince would be, I don't know, it would just be cool to be around Prince, just to learn from. I'd rather be taking lessons than anything else. But, his lessons are, up there on YouTube. If anybody questions whether Prince, was as amazing as people say, all you have to do is watch any one of his live concerts. And if your jaw's not on the floor, I don't know, because his band were so killer too, always.
I love the look on Tom Petty's face when Prince got up on stage with them all doing While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It was like, you just answered the question there. If you think how amazing a guitar player he may have been, just look on his face there. It was pretty amazing.
Again, the notes are the same. It's the expression and the freedom that he had with everything he did. He'd be the one guy who could walk on stage and trip and still be cooler than everybody else there. It's just the way he carried himself and his songwriting ability. George Harrison's son, too, the look on his face, he was just having a blast with you, laughing. And
one thing away from the music, and then we'll get back into that, but you got to tell me about the cat.
Hey, you're the first person who didn't ask about the toad. That's funny. There's a toad everywhere. So the cat, I have 3 Sphinx cats, actually, and 1 furry rescue cat. They're everywhere I am, so they just end up in pretty much everything I do because there's always at least one of them. And people wonder, how many cats? Like, is it just one cat? Because there's always 1 or maybe 2, or occasionally I'll get all of them in one shot. Well, the one, Sedona, she had 2 kittens, and those 2 kittens are now bigger than her, and I couldn't sell them. I had to keep them. So, yeah, that was my bright idea. So,
since we're talking about animals, and you did bring up the toad, what's special about the toad?
Well, I have a business called Reptile Rainforest where I do educational shows for schools and birthday parties and summer camps and all that, or at least I used to pre-pandemic. It's been 2 years now, but I also do some breeding as well. And I don't know what it is, but toads to me are just one of the most magical creatures. They're just perfect. Yeah, so I just happen to love using a toad. And it's funny because some people are just like offended. Like, why is that toad eating a bug in your video? And they're like disgusted. And other people think it's hilarious. So can't win. Yeah.
At least they're talking. That's
that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I called my Facebook group Darren Michael Boyd's Little Toads, because there's a song. I have a song called Little Toad, and that was my second release, actually, the second video, and it's still on there, and it's just a bizarre. Like, I watched it not long ago, and like, what was I even thinking? Of course, I say that a lot. Very strange.
So what's next for you? What can we expect the rest of this year?
Unless something really weird happens, I will put out a 4th album. I try to do it around Halloween. And that was just sort of a regular thing. And I know a lot of artists and people who are, so-called experts will tell you, why bother putting out an album, put out singles. And it's not just because I'm old school in my mentality. I will put out singles, but I sell more CDs than I do digital downloads. People want merchandise, and a CD, even if they don't have to listen to the CD, it's still merchandise. And I try to make the packaging really cool, something that you would want to have in your collection. And I think that's part of the key of it. And people are collecting things. They collect vinyl. Some people collect CDs. And also, I will say, for me as a creator, I love the idea of having that in my hand going, I did this, not just, I got something in the air. Like, it's a little more satisfying.
We were reading the other day about, because of the vinyl delays, that CDs are making a comeback because artists are forced to make CDs if they had maybe originally planned to make vinyl. And so it's interesting with the people that grew up with CD, it's a different generation than maybe they grew up with vinyl. And now we may see a broader CD comeback because of the vinyl delay in the production.
Yeah, that's odd, isn't it? And it's like what you said, that's kind of strange too, to think that a lot of this newer generation know more about vinyl than CDs and cassettes were. It's funny how many people sort of forget how clunky and what an actual terrible medium, if that's the word I'm looking for that, a cassette was.
Oh, sure.
Because they stretched, and I remember doing my first tour across like North America. I don't know what happened, but we ended up not having a tuner. And so like I had this kind of like a Walkman thing, and I'd play a song that I know the tuning of, and I would find a note and tune to that, and the bass player would tune to me or whatever. And anyway, the point is the tapes would stretch. And so when you're trying to learn a song, we learned songs in totally different keys because the tape was going either too fast or too slow, or so nowadays, if you're learning to play an instrument, you're kind of spoiled. You might not realize it, but all you have to do is go on YouTube and somebody's going to tell you what to do.
Well, Darren, we want to thank you so much for your time and taking the time to sit and chat with us this morning. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you.